Welcome to IHS Energy CERAWeek on Demand 2014. My name is Atul Arya. I am Senior Vice President and Business Unit Leader for IHS Energy Inside Business. Joining me here is Mr. Steve Goodman. Steve is the Energy Practice Leader at Egon Zehnder based here in Houston. Steve, welcome to
Thank you.
IHS Energy CERAWeek. It's great to have you here. The subject we want to talk about, given the nature of your business, is how have the boards evolved in the energy industry, the composition of boards evolved. And I understand you have done a major study on that. So could you just start by talking about what are some of the key high points from the highlights of that study?
No, absolutely. Part of what we've seen is that across the board within energy, activism continues to be an important topic that boards need to address. Mm-hmm. In fact, within energy, within oil and gas, we've seen a fourfold increase over the last few years relative to other industries. So as such, the targeting of activists towards the board is starting to reshape the way that boards are looked at as well as they're constituted.
So this is similar to what has happened with Hess and Occidental and Chesapeake. Those are the kind of activism you're talking about.
That's right. That's right. And
what are the consequences of that? What is that leading to? What kind of changes you're seeing in the composition of boards?
Yeah, sure. I mean, of the newly elected board members, right, recently in oil and gas companies that were targeted by activists, roughly 37% were activists appointed by nominees. So what we're seeing is that activism is starting to play itself out in the appointment of board members. And part of that activism is starting to drive towards industry expertise. They want individuals who are industry experts, right? That are very relevant, very fresh, if you will. People who, so the idea of tenure and independence become incredibly important as you look at the board and the constitution of the board.
So you're seeing people with, say, for example, an oil company looking at board members who have deeper oil and gas industry experience rather than somebody, say, from a financial sector or somebody who does not really have industry experience. Is that what you're seeing?
That's correct. That's correct. I mean, if you look at the composition of boards in energy in general, right? If you look at companies that are greater than $10 billion in market cap, what we see is that roughly 40% of these large cap companies, 40% have board members who are current or former oil and gas executives. In smaller companies, right, they're less than 2 billion market cap. What we see is that roughly 60% of the current makeup of board members are oil and gas, current or former oil and gas executives.
Wow. So that's a huge difference.
It's a huge difference traditionally, right? But now with activism, we're starting to see that is increasing even more for large companies as well as small companies, the idea of having an energy expert on the board.
And what other things you're seeing as the composition of board is evolving besides that? So one question I do have is going back to expertise. Yep. Is it because people think having experts will make sure that the decisions the companies are making are better decisions, particularly around investment choices? What do you see is the underlying reason why we want more experts?
No, that's a great perspective, right? I mean, what boards need to consider is the composition of the board, right? The age, the tenure, the independence, as well as the reputation. The activists want individuals, members on the board, who can drive change, who can affect change, and people who are not cozy, but that are anxious and willing to drive a particular agenda. And so I think that's one of the aspects here that activists are looking for individuals that have strong expertise in a given board or in a given industry to drive an agenda on the board.
So not only have the expertise, but also being more proactive members of the board. So the
Absolutely.
Membership in the board is not kind of a post-retirement activity. Is that what you're saying?
That's right. I mean, we're finding that to be on a board in energy today requires a significant amount of time, focus, and energy. It's not the country club that it may have been 10 or 15 years ago. It's a very, very involved effort.
Are you also seeing sort of a turnover in the sense, the demographics of it? Because we are seeing it more broadly in the industry that sort of the baby boomers who were going to retire, kind of extended their retirement working life a little bit because of the financial meltdown. Are you seeing the similar issues in the boards, that people with great, a lot of experience are now retiring, and it's sort of a bit of a gap now?
Yeah. I mean, we recently conducted a survey where we asked CEOs, executives, chairman of the board, various board members, quite an extensive survey across energy companies. And what we did is we asked them to identify individuals who were luminaries in the industries. Of those surveyed, 100% of those surveyed identified individuals who were luminaries and visionaries in the industry that were greater than 55 years of age.
Every one of them?
Every one of them.
I see.
When pressed to find individuals, to name individuals in the 45 to 55 year range, only 26% of the respondents were able to identify someone that they thought was a luminary or visionary. So what we've talked about, the silver tsunami that's happening over time, that continues to be, to play itself out in energy. So yes, there will be a number of people retiring, but many of the people retiring are already on boards, and several of them have already several boards and commitments to join boards. So what we'll see is a push to find industry experts to join boards, people who are quite engaged and with a strong reputation for action.
What other, so this study, by the way, this was only a North America study, or did you cover?
No, this was a North America study, correct.
Study. And in the companies surveyed included large, small, medium, oil and gas?
Across the board, including oilfield services.
Including oilfield services. Yep. So any other significant finding, from the survey? And is this published? Is it publicly available?
So this is something that we will publish. So CERA gets breaking news, which is fabulous. But look, I mean, these are one of the findings that we were seeing is that in the event of individuals with the difficulty to point to someone that is, a strong visionary or luminary, firms are trying to go more towards what GE did with Jack Welch and the popcorn stand, if you will. Right, a popcorn stand in GE, and Jack's idea was, give someone who's promising up-and-coming leader an opportunity to take on a P&L responsibility without much risk of failure if the individual does fail. Right, so there's not too much risk if the person does fail, but at the same time, it allows an opportunity to identify high potential and leaders early on. And so what we're also seeing then is companies trying to find ways to assess and identify potential in leaders. So whether it's through the Jack Welch popcorn stand or asking Egon Zehnder to look at a pool of candidates and go through a way to, a selection, identifying those characteristics that would identify them as high potential, being able to move into bigger leadership roles.
So you're kind of doing an assessment of the internal candidates to see who could take on a bigger responsibility.
Absolutely.
I mean, isn't the risk a little bit high in the oil and gas business in particular? Because I know, of course, GE is a very capital-intensive company, but still, if you screw up in the oil and gas business, then it's a pretty significant
no doubt, right? And so what's interesting though is the disruptive technology that has brought forward the shale revolution and shale gas. Provides an opportunity for many firms to identify smaller, less risky assets and allow them to take that on. So we're seeing the opportunity to take that on without taking on full leadership of multi-billion-dollar assets.
That's a great point, because really the nature of portfolio is changing. So you're not running big, say, multi-billion-dollar offshore platforms, but you're running, at a much. It is still a lot of money, but it is highly, distributed. And this is also small scale, relatively speaking.
That's right.
Smaller scale, I should say.
That's right, where there's less risk if someone does fail, but at the same time, it allows people to pull the levers. Right. Often, as we look at potential, right, we're looking at characteristics such as curiosity. How curious is this person to want to learn? Insight, being able to take massive amounts of data and make meaning of that. Right. We look at engagement, the ability to work with. To work and bring along the organization with this person. We also look at the person's resolve, the determination to overcome obstacles. Right? These are some of the characteristics that, when identified early, along with other aspects, allow then a company to be very comfortable that this person will be able to rise and will be able to take on more and more responsibility in the organization.
So these traits, you have found them through your work, that these are, in a way, what, leading indicators of future success at the leadership?
Yep, of high potential leaders, individuals that will be able to take on larger and larger roles for sure.
Yeah. And are companies looking for these leaders generally inside the company, or they're going outside the company?
Great question, great question. With the challenge associated with what we have in the industry, what we're seeing is that companies actually are looking outside. People are, some companies are starting to look to aerospace as an example, where zero tolerance, especially in oil field, right? High tolerance or very low tolerance for
failure, I mean.
Yeah, and high focus on quality. Yes, there are some companies that are starting to look at that, bringing individuals in and taking that on, but often though it's trying to identify those individuals internally. There's a great number of people that are coming out of grad school because of the economic rewards of oil and gas.
That's right.
There's the individuals that are ready to retire. I guess it was the SPE who suggested that over 50% of petroleum engineers will retire in the next few years.
That's right.
So with that, the center and what is that middle ground, and so companies are becoming much more creative in the way that they identify these executives and allow them to quickly ramp.
Your study overall, what has been the reception? Have you talked about this with your clients? You said you haven't released it publicly. So overall, what has been the reaction? Do they relate to the findings? Surprise?
The one that is most surprising is the fact that people could not identify leaders, visionaries in the 45 to 55-year-old range. People are often perplexed. I am just shocked. But yes, they identify a couple from time to time, but often they're not able to identify that. That's been one of the biggest shocking.
Yeah, I mean, isn't that partly due to the fact that there was a period, in the 90s when the industry didn't hire and we haven't groomed leaders to be in that, they would have been the leaders, right?
That's exactly
so it's a little bit of a missing generation of leaders.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we're starting to see some movement between oil and gas company, oil field services companies, whereas before, it was very rarely would you see someone going from a services company to an oil and gas company, but based on leadership potential capability, we're starting to see some of those movements because of the lack of talent.
Great. So what is the title for the study?
Well, basically, it's all encapsulated under the evolution of the boards and energy. And so within that will come the demographic and other aspects of our analysis.
And when do you plan to release it publicly?
We're hoping in the next month to have that. And of course, we need to scrub everything and make sure everything is, all the I's are dotted and T's are crossed, but we should have that ready in the next month.
Very good. Thank you very much. Very interesting study. Look forward to seeing it. And I'm sure our audience will be very interested in the industry to read the report and talk with you and your colleagues to see how you can help them.
Fantastic.
So once again, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again for joining us at IHS Energy CERAWeek On Demand 2014.